I think we gave it 5 minutes, and I'm sure people will join, and obviously this is being recorded and we will share it out. Where to start? Okay. My name is Mandana Dayani. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Like so many of you, my life was forever changed October 7th. I've been deeply heartbroken and often have felt like scared and alone and abandoned and angry and confused. And yet I've also felt the closest I've ever felt to our global community and have felt the greatest clarity and conviction that this advocacy is the most important work I will ever do in my entire life. I've had a lot of careers, which I will spare you from having to listen to, but most proudly, I am a human rights activist, and I spent all of my adult life advocating for the rights of all marginalized groups. And since October 7th, I have dedicated like every waking minute to combating anti-Semitism and digital propaganda, as well as just trying to counter hate with humanity and just reminding people of what is obviously just and what is true, even in the face of this endless disinformation and propaganda, just working to build and foster community. We wanted to bring us together for this event, which is hopefully the first of many, because we wanted everyone and all of you to know that you're not alone. There are like way over 1,000 people that RSVP'd for this Zoom because we're all facing the same fears and the same concerns. And it's someone who's just like deeply passionate about traditions and rituals. I've realized that it's like our community and ultimately our commitment to our values that is going to get us through this together. We're not powerless, we're not helpless, and each of us can show up here and in countless other situations to support each other and to stand up to hate. This gathering today is really about parenting during Jew hatred. We're not going to get into the politics of anything. We've taken many of your questions and we've sort of like bucketed them into major themes, and we won't be able to get through some of them, but obviously we will do our best to kind of address a lot of the global topics that really came through and resonated in so many of the questions that we got. It's such uncharted territory for all of us. And even though I think like Jew hatred is not new, the unabashed, relentless, toxic form it is taking in our streets and in our schools and in our communities is very much new. And it is impacting our children and us. And so like most times in my life when I really don't have the answers, I phone a friend who is usually way, way smarter than me. And so I am so excited to introduce to you two of my brilliant friends who I have the pleasure of speaking with tonight, and really trying to have like a very open and honest conversation about this. Dr. Aliza Pressman is a developmental psychologist with nearly 2 decades of experience working with families and the healthcare providers who care for them. She's the New York Times bestselling author of The 5 Principles of Parenting, an assistant clinical professor of pediatrics at Mount Sinai Hospital, where she's also the co-founding director of the Mount Sinai Parenting Center and the host of Raising Good Humans podcast, which I listen to all the time, and the mother of 2 teenagers. Rabbi Steve Leder is the senior rabbi of Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles, which many of you know, and the author of 5 books, the last 3 of which became national bestsellers, including the most recent book, which is a New York Times bestseller. His book, The Beauty of What Remains, got me through one of the hardest times in my life. He is always on TV and is saying all the important things that needs to be said with such moral clarity, and is such an incredible leader. Hi, both of you, and thank you for joining and having this conversation with me. A couple of weeks ago, I was actually at Shabbat at my family's house, and one of my family members was walking out the door with her son and, mentioned like hey, I think we should tuck in the Magen David. And I was like, wait, why would you say that? We shouldn't hide who we are. And she was like, well, I don't want him to get his ass kicked. And I sort of realized in that moment, like, I actually don't know the right answer. I don't even know if there is a right answer. I don't know, while I can go on TV all the time and talk about like the politics and debate all the issues surrounding this conflict, there were so many situations, even with my own kids, in which like I tortured myself for days about whether I was handling something like the right way, or what was I supposed to do, or like how are you supposed to navigate these things. And then I think I sort of realized that if I am feeling this way, that so many others must be feeling this way. And I think the incredible response we got from so many people when we just posted this as like a thing we wanted to do, I think really showed how important this was. And so hopefully this is the first of many of these that we will do. But I think to get us started, I'm going to punt this over. We got so many questions about that exact issue, which is like, do we hide the necklace or the mezuzah or the yarmulke? Are we traumatizing our children in one way? Do we tell them to hide for safety, or do we tell them to stand firm in our pride? What is the impact of those decisions on our children? So Lisa, I'm going to punt this to you because I think this is like a big framing question, and fear is so like widespread, I think, in our community right now, and just like not understanding how to navigate some of this stuff. And I know in your book you talk about like toxic stressors versus tolerable stressors. How like are like what is the trauma like for our children, and how do we navigate some of this?
Well, I think, first of all, thank you for doing this. I think we all are just ready to sit here and talk about this. But I would like to have, just in the framing of this, some relief for everyone here, in that the fact that you're here, the fact that we're having this conversation, toxic stress is the kind of stress that we would never want for anyone. It's the kind of stress that floods your brain with cortisol. There's no letting up, and you can't learn, you can't think. It leads to poor health outcomes later in life. It's bad. However, if you have, in any context of stress, if you were in Israel right now, if you have the loving support of at least one caregiver, and it really only takes one, who is there for you through those feelings, it actually moves the category of stress from toxic to tolerable. So I say that, and also what we're talking about here isn't, for the most part, toxic stress anyway. It isn't in that category. But tolerable stressors, in the context of having that support from a caregiver, actually can build resilience. So we have an opportunity here. And I want to frame this conversation that way only because the relief that we need is in the science. Now, we also have spirituality here, which I'm so excited about. But I'd like us to lean into the science of it, because I know that, myself included, we are so highly stressed, and we can get into a space for ourselves where we're not feeling like we can come down from that. And we need to, in order to be there for our kids. And also, I just want everyone to know, like, even when you make the mistake, if you do say the wrong thing, if it's tuck in versus leave out the Jewish star, you're not causing trauma in that moment for your kid. And we can always just come back to, can we navigate our own nervous system so we can support our kids? And then I'm not worried so much about the kids.
Really? Like they're not, this isn't like something that for years they're going to feel like we did, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's just so, it feels like such a big decision because it feels like you're giving them a signal about their identity. You know
I
what I mean?
think there is a space between tuck in your Magen David and leave it out and be proud. There's going to be context, time and place. And so you can have real conversations, particularly with school-age kids and up, where you can say, in certain settings, unfortunately, we have to be careful about some of the things that we're showing about our Judaism if you're scared. And in other settings, let it go. That doesn't take away your pride at being Jewish. And for some of you, you might say, I'm wearing it no matter what. What I'm trying to say is that whatever the answer is, if you, the adult in their life, feel like you have yourself covered, you're not feeling like I'm myself in trauma right now, your child can have these experiences and have the moments of asking you questions. They have to know that they can come to you. If they feel like they have to take care of you, that you will fall apart, that's when we get into trouble with our kids, is if they need to take care of our nervous system. We need to be able to take care of them and also feel our own stress. And say to them, like, I have ways to cope, so you don't have to take care of me. And then it doesn't matter the detail of whether or not you say, listen, right now, the place we're going to, I need you to tuck that in, because it will make sense to them and they know they can come to you and they don't have to worry about you freaking out either way. Like, if they came to you and they didn't feel safe to say, hey, I want to keep my Magen David out, and you screamed at them because you were so scared about their safety, and it was not necessarily rooted in reality in the, they're going into their school and that they're actually safe, but you're just feeling unsafe, versus they're walking into a place where it's absolutely a threat and you don't have time to kind of calm your nervous system. I think that's what we have to be thinking about here, more than are we getting it right each time.
Rabbi Leader, what about you? Like, I know obviously you're getting this question all the time.
Yeah. And look, let's start with this sense that a lot of us as parents feel lost and alone and unsure, but we are not making history right now.
Yeah.
This is not a new story for the Jewish people or for Jewish parents. This is a new chapter in a very old story. And we can look backward for guidance, because there is no aspect of Jew hatred that the sages didn't think through very carefully. And we tend to think of our problems as modern problems. There are no modern problems. The human condition hasn't changed significantly since Jew hatred began 3,000 years ago. And the sages have thought this through for us. So let's use as an example the fact that the Chanukiah, the Hanukkah menorah, is supposed to be placed in a window, Pirsumet Hanes, to publicize the miracle of Hanukkah. But at the same time, the rabbis of the Talmud say you bring it indoors if it's a time during which Jewish lives are in danger. These things are symbols, and we don't die for symbols. We die for real ideals, or we live for real ideals. So you are forbidden to put your own life at risk. You are forbidden to put your family's life at risk if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
Martyrdom is not a Jewish ideal. It is not. Jewish law forbids it, frankly. So I would say that we have a long tradition of trusting your instincts and the context. And that's parenting all day, every day, isn't it? I mean, isn't parenting about trusting your instincts? And so we are not required to risk our lives for a symbol. Okay, we risk our lives for ideals, if at all. And look, my approach would be, let's all take our stars out and wear them. Or here are 10 stars, give them out to your friends. Or tuck it in if you're concerned, because being a Jew is not about jewelry, right? So, but for at least 2,000 years, Jewish law has been pretty clear that in a time of danger, you first and foremost protect the lives of the people you love. So there are 3 exceptions in Jewish law to that, none of which are likely to happen to any of us here in America. So you are allowed to use your parental intuition. And Aliza, it's so true, right or wrong. If you make a mistake, you make a mistake, but you do have intuition, and use it.
We got so many questions, about particularly the really little ones. So many parents, and by the way, I've had this conversation so many times. How much do we share with them? And like what is appropriate to tell them, when, like, how much do you explain to them? How much context do you give them? What information, because they hear things, obviously, and they've asked questions, like my little ones always ask questions. And by the way, there's a huge difference between how my 6-year-old hears this information and how my 9-year-old hears this information, right? And so even the information I share between them is like vastly different. But I just, Aliza, I would love your take on,
Yeah.
particularly for the little ones, what you say or what you think is appropriate.
I would say if they're not even in grade school yet, you say as little as possible and keep them having their happy, blissful bubble. And don't turn the news on in front of them. And the only reason to say something is if you, the parent, are having such an emotional response that you need to say, something sad happened, and so I'm sad about it, and I just wanted to let you know, but I know how to take care of myself. And like, you really don't need to expose a preschooler to things that feel so confusing and out of control that it wouldn't like turn them into a thoughtful activist. It would just scare them. We need them to feel safe in order to learn and grow. And then if you do need to say something,
Yeah,
you
like
want
if
to,
they ask what happened October 7th, like what would you say? What were the what are the words?
well, I doubt a preschooler's asking what happened October 7th. And I think you could say that you can be very sort of basic and vague with the younger kids of just, there's a war going on in a very far away place in Israel and their neighbors in Gaza. And I mean, it's really in Gaza, but you can keep the language that simple, and it makes me sad. And so sometimes I get sad about it. It's not something that you have to worry about. You are safe and I am safe. That's it. And if you have any questions, you can come ask me anytime. And we can leave it at that. And then you always want to give, if they have a question, answer it, but you give them what they want to know and you ask them what they know. So once they get into school age, you would say, you might have heard, or are people talking about this? I'm curious what you know. And that way, it's like when you have a sex talk, you don't lead with exactly the mechanics of sex. You're just kind of finding out what they know and then coming back with just enough information so they know you're the first person to tell them the information, not the last person. And school age, even as you have 6 and 9, the information gets more specific with your 9-year-old, and they typically have more questions. But you probably until middle school aren't getting into a lot of the details. The one thing I would say, this is just going to depend on your individual family and exposure. If you have older siblings talking about it, cousins, family members, if there's social media around, if your kids have exposure to phones, then you have to have a different kind of conversation than if they don't. And so that's going to be really important. But if they do have that exposure, I really encourage parents to shift the exposure because of what's going on. And also because that kind of input visually is much more harmful. Seeing these images is much more harmful than having conversations about it, even for us.
I'll share a very brief story with you that I think fits well with what. Do you mind if I call you? Do you want me to call you Aliza, Dr. Pressman, Dr.
No,
Aliza?
please call me doctor.
Doctor. Okay.
Aliza.
Okay, doctor. So I think this will fit nicely and additionally to what Aliza has shared with us, which I think is spot on. I'll tell you a very brief story. A few years ago, we had a bar mitzvah interrupted with a bomb threat, a called-in bomb threat to our campus, one of our campuses. So I grabbed the Torah, put it in my car, and everyone got in their cars, and we went to the hotel where the luncheon was going to take place. We called ahead. They set up a room for us. They found a challah. They rallied the hotel staff, and we hit play again and proceeded with the bar mitzvah. The first thing I said to this little guy was, most important of all about today, I want you to remember the people who rallied the Asian woman who welcomed you at the door, the black woman who went out and found a challah for us, the hotel staff that set up the chairs, all of your family and friends, everybody who made this work, because that's the world.
Mm.
Most people in the world do not hate Jews. Most people in the world are good, and they don't harm other people, and they don't call in threats. The news is not the world. And I think that in its own way is also very comforting, and it is the truth. You know,
Mhm.
do you know what most people in the world think about Jews? They don't. They don't. I grew up in the Midwest. Nobody there is obsessed with Israel, the Jewish people, this or that. So while it feels like the world is an entirely hostile place, if you watch the news or watch your phone,
Yeah.
it's not. And and I will say this, look, I'm as aggressive about Hamas and what's happening as I think any rabbi I've come across in the country. Like, I'm very clear here.
Mhm.
But I am also clear about the fact that all roads do not lead to Auschwitz. They don't. Now, there are no winners, but Israel is not going to be defeated. And we are going to get through this, and we are going to be okay. And most of the world is full of good people. And so this is an opportunity
Yeah.
to reassure at a more meta level about existence itself and our place in the world.
I totally agree. Totally agree. Thank you for sharing.
That was beautiful.
Yeah.
I really, just because the realistic optimism is so important for our kids, but it's also important for us. So sometimes in the process of responding to our kids, like this kind of conversation, I think is giving us a reminder of the relief. And I think that all roads do not lead to Auschwitz. I mean, by the way, as the grandchild of Holocaust survivors, this comes up constantly for Jews, but I think that's such an important sentence to remind yourself because we're paying so much attention to the news and because it does feel like it is everything top of mind for everybody and it does feel like there's a lot of hatred. It's hard to step back and remind ourselves of that kind of optimism, which is so nice to hear.
I totally agree. I was home actually, like, I think I shared this with you, Lisa. I was home the other day and I was like on a Zoom, and then my daughter walks in, my 9-year-old, and I was just like, hey, like thinking she was just going to tell me a 1 second hi. And she goes, Mom. And I looked up at my computer and she goes, why do people hate Jews? And I was like, I just was not at all prepared. I was like, hi guys, I'm gonna have to come back. But I had that similar conversation with her, which is, hey, Andy, like, think about what's on the news, right? Like the guy who's home eating chicken with his family, watching TV is not on the news. That person has no hate. They're going about their day. The people that are the most extreme doing, seeing what you're seeing on the streets and violence and graffiti, that's what the news is going to cover. That is not at all like representative of the world or the majority of the people. And so also like it was a really, I think important opportunity to have a conversation with her about understanding what is on the news and what is representative of, like, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the most important thing or representative of the whole world just because it is on the news. And so
Yeah. And if the kids are old enough, I often say to people, I'm sure, Aliza, this happens in your office all the time, in your own words, but I say to people all the time, when someone slams a door, they're not angry at the door. And historically, Jews have been the door. And people who are filled with hate have their own set of problems that we are very fortunate, frankly, not to have. And I'm not trying to create any sense of empathy for Hamas because I have none. But there's no question that they are the product
Yeah.
of a very troubled and hate-filled society. And there is that context. Like it is what is expressed as Jew hatred.
Mm-hmm.
When you really drill down, it has very little to do with Jews.
Totally, could not agree more. Just being so in the thick of this. One hopefully quick question just to get through this younger age section is, and Aliza, maybe this is for you, but what age do you think it's appropriate to share with your children about the Holocaust?
Oh, I think the Holocaust is so, this one is so tricky just because I grew up with this. I don't not know when I first learned about it, but I can tell you that if I'm thinking about it from the lens of a developmental psychologist, I would wait until they are deeper into elementary school, much deeper into elementary school. And having said that, I went to a Jewish day school where we started in kindergarten making little 1 million flowers or 1 million pennies, or each year we did a project of 1 million to put in the gym to teach us how many children died in Treblinka. Now, I don't actually think that was the best path, but I think it was a school that was a Jewish school that came, run by people who really were directly impacted by the Holocaust, and never again was the mission of the school ultimately. I think that is hard on kids, and I think there's a way to talk about your Judaism in more positive ways, get your identity together so that your identity isn't completely about the Holocaust. Mine
Yes,
is,
I,
but
I, yeah, I totally, I can tell you when I learned about the Holocaust, I remember it distinctly, and I think it was an appropriate age. I was 12 years old
yep.
and preparing for my bar mitzvah, and one of the books we read was Elie Wiesel's Night. I remember reading it in my tiny little basement bedroom in the cold of a Minnesota winter. And it was perfectly appropriate because he wrote it from the point of view of a teenager going through this. And I related to it, and it was graphic but not gratuitous. And it opened my eyes in a very age appropriate way. So it's not just when, but how do we expose kids to this? Now, I will also tell you that at Sunday school, they put us all in an auditorium when I was 12 and showed us Night and Fog, which is, the first, one of the first, if not the first documentary French film, I think like 52 or something, 1952, of these black and white images of bodies being bulldozed into pits and things like that. I don't know how much I gained from that. I don't think much. I think I gained a lot more from Elie Wiesel. So and Aliza's making a very important point that I've preached about a lot, which is ultimately negativity and darkness will not hold the next generation of Jews. It won't.
I can't agree more. Oh my God, I say this all day.
And you know it from what you went through as a child, Mandana. If your children are raised with only the narrative of slaughter and oppression, that's not what Judaism is ultimately about.
I've been having this conversation since October 8th, which is like, we need to explain what we are for. We need to also not just
in other words, being an anti-Semite is not the ultimate expression of your Jewish identity. It is not. And if it becomes that, we're going to lose. And we have to be clear-eyed about our enemies and all of that. But if I guess it's kind of like this, when Santayana said those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it, I think that's true. But it is equally true that those who only remember the past are doomed to repeat it.
By the way, I've been having this conversation even about like Holocaust education and Holocaust Remembrance Day, which was like, it's amazing and it's so important, but it's insufficient if you don't explain what happens when Jews live. Like when you look at the context.
Not only explain, but experience and live.
Of course.
Judaism is a Shabbat dinner at Mandana's house. Okay, that's being a Jew, right? It is, and it's a joyful, beautiful way to live and see the world, and we are sometimes hated and have to protect ourselves.
Agree.
And one thing to just keep in mind for people who talked about it really early, or, you know, or who want to have more conversations about the Holocaust or fewer conversations, is, you know, your child, and kids have temperament. They just come into this world with a certain way of responding to the environment. And for one kid, they're going to be super curious about it. And another child is going to not want to know more. And we have time. These things can come
Yeah.
out over time. We just have to recognize that some of our kids, you know, you could have one child that you talked about it, talk about the Holocaust with much earlier. They were curious, they weren't scared, they were responding with a different, you know, sort of something that made sense for you. And another kid who just isn't going to feel safe in the world learning about it so early. So that's also something to keep in mind.
And at some point, and this may be your next question, I don't know, but at some point, all of our children, all Jewish children, at some point, get a wake-up call.
Yeah.
That there are people in the world who wish us harm. But if that wake-up call comes after a foundation of joy in living as a Jew, it's a lot easier to take. It's because Judaism then is the caretaker that Aliza started with. That singular, comforting, protective caretaker comes in the form of a human being, but it can also come in the form of an entire culture and tribe. And then you can withstand the blows that come your way.
Oh my God, I love thinking about it that way.
Oh, you're such a
It's a holding environment. That's what Judaism is in therapeutic terms.
Well,
Good.
I know, right? Guys, I really have the best phone of friends of anyone. Okay, we got a lot of these questions. Now, like a little bit of the older kids, kids in school. And this is really to both of you, but you know, kids coming home who have friends who are supporting some of the more radical pro-terrorist ideology and sharing about it on social media. People like, you know, kids that are losing friends or not sure how to confront someone who posted something or said something that really offended them. And a lot of these questions of like, I don't know what to tell my kid. Should they be friends with the kid or should they not be friends with the kid? Are you supposed to explain to the kid? Like, how do you guide your children through navigating something that has like shaken their friendships in a way that's also shaken their like identity and their core?
You want to go first, Aliza?
I'm going to say one little thing and then I'm going to just send it right to you. But one thing that I just want to remind everybody of is that while an adult saying something or doing something that feels incredibly painful to us and Jew hating can be a deal breaker in a relationship, we have to give kids a little bit more room for grace and mistakes, and being able to say to them and practice saying, hey, here's how that just felt. And I just wanted you to know because I think you love me. And I think that, you know, that whatever it is, giving our kids the ability to first give a more generous interpretation, give a benefit of the doubt. And then like, if after that, it's like, no, they did mean that they hate you and they don't believe you should exist. I think we have to teach our kids about getting rid of friends that don't care about us in the way that they need to. But the adult response can't be the same as kids need to have, because they're going to fall on their faces a lot. And I want our kids to know they're also allowed to fall on their faces and say the wrong thing and do the wrong thing, especially in a world where you're not allowed to anymore. And that we can be more generous. And then once we've been generous and given people the opportunity to make it right and to make repairs, if it doesn't happen, that's a whole other conversation. But now I kind of feel like I need a rabbi for this one.
No, I think that's right. Look, kids, you got to cut kids a lot of slack. Their brains are half baked, and kids do stupid things. And I just want to second what Aliza said. Let's talk about doubt. People who operate in the world without doubt are the most dangerous people in the world. They're called fanatics or extremists. Because if you don't make room in your heart and your soul and your mind for doubt, then you're really not interested in growing as a human being, and you really don't care about other people. So doubt is really, really important. There's this horseshoe theory of politics that the body politic is shaped like a horseshoe, meaning the extreme left and the extreme right are actually the closest together. It's this middle where there's doubt. That's where real life happens. But these polar opposites that are actually identical in their extremism and lack of doubt, they're dangerous. They're dangerous on both sides. And so approaching people with this sense of doubt, I think is really important. I'm going to tell you two very quick stories. The first, an ancient story. You all know the story of the Passover plagues, the 10 plagues, the 9th plague of darkness. So the rabbis ask a really interesting question about that 9th plague. They ask, well, what was the nature of this darkness? Was it a 24-hour night? Was it a solar eclipse? What was really going on here? And I won't walk you through the whole conversation, but the punchline is, the conclusion they draw is that, first of all, the text says, it was so dark that no person could get up mitachtav, which means out from underneath himself, from his own place, right? No doubt, locked in. Meaning that it was so dark in terms of a lack of empathy that the Israelites and the Egyptians could no longer see the humanity in the other. That's the blindness. That's the darkness. That is the darkest darkness, is when there's no room for doubt. So I think it's very important to say to kids, let's give this a try. Let's go a little deeper. Now I'm going to tell you a story from when I was in 2nd grade, which I guess would be 7 years old. Mrs. Carlson, Aquila Elementary School, St. Louis Park, Minnesota. The day before, I had heard, I grew up in a racist family, so let me just start with that. And earlier, the day before this event happened I'm about to describe, I heard a racist joke in the station wagon with the 5 kids and mom and dad, and everybody was laughing. I didn't really understand it, but I thought, that's a funny joke, I guess. So the next morning, I went to school, and I told Mrs. Carlson the joke. And that was it. She didn't laugh. We went out today, but then she ended our studies early. And at the end of the day, she sat the whole class down and she said, class, earlier today, someone told me a joke that I don't think they understood, but it was a joke that was insulting to people who are Black, and it's hurtful and it's wrong. And I know this person didn't mean to be hurtful and wrong. I am not being hyperbolic when I tell you, I remember that day like it was yesterday, and it changed my life. It changed my life because not that she corrected me, but how she corrected me. She gave me the benefit of the doubt.
Mm.
She affirmed my goodness while pointing out my mistake. I wish I could find, she's probably 90 years old today. I don't know. But I remember that, and I can't tell you what I had for breakfast 3 days ago. So these parenting opportunities for helping our kids approach the world, not in certitude and blindness and darkness, but with some kind of openness, and that most people behave badly because they're wounded, that's life-changing for kids. And yeah, fool me twice, I'm out, right?
Mm,
Because they're also going to experience in life toxic relationships, which they need to end. I mean, who doesn't have those?
I've had all
And
of
especially with as the kids get older, I think the teenagers and college age kids are experiencing a lot of that. And it's, we know that that's true and we know that that's hard. And that's where they need our almost permission to end those relationships.
Yep.
And it's not about political disagreement because that's different. It's about fundamentally realizing that this person may just not
Doesn't care.
I pick up the phone
care.
all the time and call people and just say and explain. And I'm like, I don't think you understand. Like, because I genuinely don't think that they understand the weight of some of these words and hashtags and things. And I would say there's never been an instance when I called somebody and they didn't move. You know what I mean?
Well,
They didn't.
I'm gonna show you something without getting into the details. I was almost, well, I felt like I was going to be canceled at one point. This was several years ago. And I happened to be studying this Torah portion. It was the week of this Torah portion about the plagues and the darkness. And that's why I've got so deeply into it. And I found this Hasidic blessing, which I just took off of the shelf above my desk here. And I keep it there all the time because it really helped me make something of the hell I was going through. And it says, just as you judged me favorably, so may God judge you favorably.
Mm,
Give people the chance
yeah.
that you yourself would hope for if you accidentally or ignorantly or unintentionally hurt someone. And that is world changing, life changing. It's been here for like 4 years.
Oh, I love that so much. We got quite a bit of questions also about social media. And so many different versions of this. One, how do you protect kids from just misinformation and all the things that they're seeing? And then on the other hand, parents that were afraid that their kids were going to get radicalized and indoctrinated. And then parents that were really concerned about just protecting the mental health of their kids who are just seeing like these horrible images and videos and being re-traumatized by them and in all these different ways. I sort of feel like our next parenting Zoom should be almost entirely dedicated to social media because I think there's so much to discuss here. But from like a just higher level, as you think about some of these big questions, is there anything you can share for parents on here?
This is your wheelhouse, doctor.
I mean, it goes without saying, if they're using social media to get information, which they are,
Yeah.
some of them, many of them, that means having serious conversations with your adolescents about where to get proper information and really being responsible, because we can't expect tech companies to be responsible at this point. Someday, really be responsible for helping us not raise lazy thinkers. We really want to be robust thinkers. That's part of our Jewish culture. It's part of who we are. And so I think that's part of it is like, what is your child using social media for? And you can check their algorithm. They not in secret, be open with them. I have access to your social media. I'm going to check once in a while. That's my job. And if you have a child who's already showing signs of struggles in any way, if their mental health is at all being challenged, it will be amplified by social media. We know this. And so you might need to turn the volume down or move it, get rid of it. we also, if your kids aren't using social media yet, don't have them use put it off for sure. But I will say that for adolescents who are on social media, who are looking at dogs and, chefs, you don't need to really worry about it. It's the ones where you see that it's this algorithm that's showing what probably our social media shows. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I hear a lot from parents, well, that ship sailed and it's like the genie's out of the bottle now. And I actually think we have to remember that we do have a responsibility to our kids to help them in areas where they're not completely ready. And if they were not using a car properly, but they had a driver's license, we would take a break and have them take some classes and make them practice more. We wouldn't just be like, so you're getting in accidents all the time. Let's just keep giving you the car. So I think we really need to remember that if we are feeling like things have gone off the rails or our kids are suffering or we're looking at an algorithm and it is incredibly unhealthy, that we need to set boundaries and limits around it.
Yeah, there are many types of obscenity, right? There are many types of porn, and right now there's war porn.
Totally.
Right? There's that there's gun porn, war porn, hate porn. And if parents can think of it in that context, I think you feel more empowered to weigh in, right? And because it is pornographic, it is obscene, and it doesn't serve any good purpose for children. So I'm just seconding you, Aliza. Like, I gave a talk. I won't mention which one, but at a big West LA private school. After which it was a Q&A and some other things, and then after which, when I was walking out to my car with the head of school, she said, thank you, thank you, thank you. I just want these parents to be parents. That's just like, why do they expect the school to raise their children? Be parents. If your 12-year-old was looking at porn all day long, you'd weigh in. Well, this stuff is no different. So weigh in, raise your kids.
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many conversations with my daughter about like fake accounts and trolls and understanding that like some things are just not real. Like she literally came home the other day and told me
Even real things can be obscene.
And they're not necessarily, even if your brain at that age, we have trouble as adults. Your developing brain does not have your prefrontal cortex is not fully formed until 18 to 30 years old. So these images, even if you're explaining constantly to your kids, it's still not really translating for them.
I just think what's hard is like yes, there's like some of it is images, but a lot of it is just fake information and fake news about their identity,
same thing
about their community. And you're just like, no, that is not true. No, that did not happen. No, Jews do not believe that. No, that is not who we are, right? Like there is this feeling like we're always on the defense, right? Like we always have to explain to our kids. And I know that, Rabbi Leader, we talked a lot about like, actually part of the solution is just embracing Judaism, right? And like Judaism is what heals us and helps us get through some of these things, because then you also know that these things are not true because you understand what Judaism is, and you understand. And, and I think so much about like, what is the right way to explain the connectivity between being Jewish and Israel, right? And
well, look, let's just start with the fact that what most people outside of the Jewish community don't realize is that Judaism we're a tribe. We're a global tribe. Our religion is Judaism. Our ancient and modern homeland is Israel. But it is certainly possible to be a Jew and a non-Zionist, to be a secular Zionist and not a religious Jew. We're a tribe, and we have our own dance, our own music, our own food, and embracing the diversity within the Jewish community, I think, is also a very important experience for children. to understand that much of what is said about us by our detractors and haters is just unbelievably rudimentary and therefore untrue. Most people, a simple one for college age kids is, Jews being called white colonizers. More than half of the Jews in Israel are people of color. B, there hasn't been a Jew in Gaza since 2003, so I don't know who's doing the colonizing of what or where. So, understanding the rich complexity of the Jewish people is also really helpful when you have to confront lies. I was going to say myths, but they're really not myths, they're lies. They're
Yeah.
not. So that's part of it. And then I want to go back to one thing that Aliza said that I think is really important about give people the opportunity, but if they really show you who they are, be done with them. And I think that this can be very helpful to our kids, older kids, who are exposed to the whataboutism of the plight of the Palestinian people. So we're a group of Jews here, I'm assuming mostly on this. So I do want to say this much, that the Palestinians, they deserve better. They deserve better from their own leaders. They deserve better from the Arab nations and their Arab brethren. They deserve better from Israel, and they deserve better from us. They do. However, and this is the disambiguation that's so important and for our kids to understand. However, that admittedly legitimate, nuanced, complex conversation has nothing to do with Hamas and October 7th. Nothing. And you can be, therefore, an open-minded, empathetic person and still call evil evil, commit to eradicating it, and not being apologetic about any of that. So we have this feeling like we're either a closed-minded person or an open-minded person, a closed, cold-hearted person or an open and warm-hearted person. We are both, because both are appropriate ways to live in the world. And helping our children discern where empathy stops and self-interest and decency begins.
Yeah.
That's so important. And this is a big opportunity to do that for our children and to do it for ourselves.
Completely agree. I've talked so much. Thank you for saying that. With my kids about like everything doesn't fit in a box and this binary thinking of you're one or the other and you're pro this or anti that. Like,
So especially with adolescents, they're trying to find their tribe. They're trying to find their identity in their home and school, their crew. And we have all done this where we sort of find people who have similar values and similar responses to things. And so then you start copying whatever their responses are, their moral responses to things. And now all of a sudden it's getting shifted and it's confusing because people, again, they don't have critical thinking skills. There's so much disinformation and it's confusing. And so they are finding themselves wondering if they're on the wrong side of the morality here, because for other things, their tribe is at school is in agreement with them. And so I think that this conversation with our kids is hugely important to understand that we don't just like decide and go with everybody all the time, because sometimes there is, as you said, there are two terrible choices, but one is very clearly worse. And we have to help our kids find their moral rudder so that they have capacity to say, wow, I had identified with this whole group of people, this group of friends, or this group of ideologies, whatever it is, but now I have to question it. And I really hope for us as part of our newfound job as Jewish parents post October 7th is that we will go back to the core of Judaism, which is this intellectual robustness, where we just don't allow the just signing up for things because it feels like the right thing when it's not rooted in information that's accurate. And so we have to help them. So even to go back to when Mandana, when you were saying that your daughter's seeing information, it's totally wrong. We have to help them look at information in a different way. And it's scary because, you know, you want to feel like there's some truth in the world, but we have to teach them about a post-truth world. We have to talk about these things, and we need to get their tools sharpened for it.
It's, you know, the other day my daughter came home and I was dealing with like a big part of this conflict, and I was just like a mess. And I just had that other moment of just like, am I allowed to be this way in front of them? Like, am I allowed to break down? You know, how much of the heartbreak that all of us are feeling, right? Like everyone's also going through all of their own like shit, dealing with this thing that's really, really, really hard, and also trying to parent the kids who are going through something that's really hard in a landscape that feels completely unfamiliar, in a sea of just endless batshit insanity, which is how I would define what every day feels like. And so I don't know, Lisa, if you just have like a quick answer to that, but any thoughts on just like how much of our like pain do we share, and can we share in front of our kids?
I, go
Steve,
ahead, Aliza.
Rabbi Steve?
Well, I'll tell you this. Again, it depends on the age of your kids and their nature. But when my kids were teenagers and we went to Europe, we went to Munich, we went to Dachau, I said Kaddish with them in front of the ovens, and I cried, and I put my arms around them and I said, just be good Jews. And that was it. There was no sermon, there was no speech, there was just, okay. And I just took my son to Israel with me. I was there just for 3 days to bear witness and have a few important conversations with people. And he's 34. And I was myself, and I let him see that. And I don't think it hurt him. And I gave him the space to be himself. And sometimes we were aligned, and sometimes we were sitting together, and sometimes we were apart. And he walked through Nir Oz differently than I walked through Nir Oz. I don't think we do our children any favor by pretending not to be human. I think we can all remember the moment we realized our parents were just people.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's a bad realization.
And I would go as far as to say it's important early on to have appropriate emotional responses to things in front of our kids, because otherwise they know what's happening and they question themselves. So even if they're much younger and they see that we're sad, but we're not showing that we're sad, we're holding it in, it is actually scarier than naming your affective state. And I know but just saying like, yeah, I'm sad because this happened, whatever it is, being able to name it. It's just the difference is your child still needs to know that you know how to take care of yourself when you're feeling that way. I mean, that's the only thing. If you're leaning on your kids to help you through, that's when you ask yourself, like, do I have someone else or something else I can do to support me right now? And also, you could have two parents having the same, visually seeing the same reactions. You would see they're both crying, but one kid feels safe and one kid doesn't. And that's usually the difference, is that one kid feels responsible for their parents' feelings, and they don't know that feelings are temporary and that this is just part of being a person. And one kid is well aware of it and is like, of course, this makes sense. And I don't think we'd want our children to think that we can just robotically experience things coming at us because we're strong. That's not, that isn't.
Yeah, it's kabuki.
Yeah. And it's scary because it's like, then they start to go, I think, like, I don't think that's how they feel, but that's what they're showing. It's very confusing. So naming how you feel, showing how you feel, but just really being clear that you know how to live through those feelings. We need them to know that these feelings are survivable and that, of course, we have them.
I felt
Got a lot of
closer.
questions. Oh, sorry.
I would just say I felt closer to my parents when I realized they were just people. It did not distance me from them. It
Yeah,
endeared them and me to them.
yeah, I feel the same way. We got like a lot of questions around like people that have experienced anti-Semitism with their kids. And what, how to handle those moments with our children. I had shared a video on my Instagram, I don't even know, it was like a month ago of we were in New York and, some person came up to us. We were standing with a congregation of people singing a prayer for the hostages and was screaming all these like horrible profanities. And I walked up to the person and he said, "Can you please give them a minute, let them finish their prayer and then say what you want to say?" And then he just started screaming at me and spitting out at me and screaming at my kid, whatever. Um, it became a whole thing and the police came involved and blah, blah, blah. But after it, I looked over, my kids were both like visibly shaking. And my older daughter was like, can we just go home, mommy? I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. And I was like, no, we're going to keep going. That's what we do. Like, that is a bad person who's saying bad things and, just like assaulted us essentially. And look at these people. They're standing here peacefully praying for the return of a baby to come home to his family. Like, you're not doing anything wrong. We're going to keep going. We're going to go get lunch. We're going to go get our holiday. Like, this is like, you have to have like conviction what you're doing. And then I was like, shit, should I have taken my kid home and like hugged her and just given her hot cocoa and been like, I know that was hard. But in that moment, I felt like the more important thing was to show her that like we're resilient and we keep going and you are standing on the right side of whatever that you explain, that conflict that you just experienced, and you should feel like you were doing the right thing in that moment. Anyways, but I was like, I don't know, is there a right way to do that? And I feel like we got so many of these questions from people that were saying like, oh, I was on a walk and this thing happened and something happened in my kid's school and someone screamed at us while we were in the car and I didn't know what to turn over and say to my kid. Did I pretend like it didn't happen? Obviously, that's not the right answer, but I guess, Aliza, I don't know for you how you would talk to a parent about how to coach through something like that.
I would just keep reminding all of us that in those moments, there is no right or wrong. Like whether you decided to go home and have a hug or go stand strong, whatever it is, I think that was right for you. And she saw that you were not scared and you were not so scared that you had to leave and that you keep her safe and you would make that choice because of that, because even though it's scary or even though it's upsetting, it's survivable. But in general, I would say our kids borrow our nervous systems. That is what they do. It's co-regulation. It's just what it is. And so if in any of those circumstances, we feel like we can figure out how to name it, address it, and move forward, our kids are going to be okay. Whether or not we decide to cry, yell, or chill out. It really is about making sure that we understand the more we sort of deal with ourselves,
Yeah.
the more our kids are going to be able to navigate this, even when terrible things are said and things come our way. If they feel threatened, like fully threatened, if they see somebody saying something anti-Semitic and we panic, sometimes rightfully, sometimes it is a physical threat to us, but sometimes it's just like, it's possible for us to be like, that's just another asshole. Sorry. I feel like it's
No,
just
no, I totally agree.
talking, but realizing we're with other
Steve,
people.
I have a different question for you.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is, and I think a lot of parents are going through this, particularly at schools and in communities, which is, what can and should we expect from our synagogues and our educators and our leaders? How much can we expect of like the institutions that we're a part of to help our children? And, should we be advocating at school
Yeah.
for more support and more programming? Like how, I think so many of us feel like there's a lack of support or a lack of response, or how the hell did our school not understand that was so inappropriate? And like, what can you, and I know you've been helping so many people navigate these questions.
I think, first of all, expect and demand.
Mm.
You are not powerless within the communities of which you are a part. right? So look, we all have a right to demand of our synagogues that they be talking about these things with our kids, that the rabbi is speaking out. This is not a political issue. This is not a left, right, or center issue.
Right.
Jew hatred is a transcendent issue. And if your synagogue and your rabbi aren't dealing with it, you have a right to demand that they do. If they're not preparing your rising seniors to go off to college and deal with the reality of the college campuses, you have a right to expect and demand that. If they are, if your synagogue is not reaching out to your Christian and Muslim neighbors and bringing them together with you to have conversations, if you haven't invited the senior pastor from across the street to preach on Friday night, and if your rabbi hasn't made the offer to go there on Sunday morning, we have to keep talking with each other and to each other rather than at each other. And also within your own family unit, let's become more microcosmic about it. There's a lot of things that you can do, and doing is great medicine, right? The Talmud says, say little and do much. And are your kids writing cards to soldiers? Are they reaching out to their other Jewish friends? We sent out these bracelets, 10,000 of them, to every member of the temple. And I'm always like this with the kids, like, hey, you got yours, you got yours. And they feel more, they feel like they're part of something and that they are standing together. So look for ways that you can volunteer. And I would say this, I know this is not realistic for everyone. Go to Israel. Go to Israel as soon as you can. I left LA on a Sunday.
Yeah.
And I was back Thursday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning.
I went twice since October 7th, and both
Yeah.
times was I mean, it's unbelievably
Go
powerful.
for 2 days, go for 3 days. Take your family if your kids are old enough. You're safe. If you're not safe, no one's going to let you be in places where you're not safe when you're in Israel. The army doesn't let a group go anywhere without permission. So go to Israel. Why? Because you're teaching your kids to show up when other people are suffering. To me, people have asked me, what was it like to be in Israel? And I can either give you a 2-day explanation or a 2-word explanation. So I'm going to give you the 2-word explanation. Sitting Shiva. Being in Israel now is showing up and sitting Shiva with 7 million people, because that's how it feels. And you're teaching your children to show up, not run away from people who are suffering that we care about. So just show up, go to Israel, and go to Israel. It means, look, the way I put it is like the way I explain going to Shiva. It changes nothing, but it means everything. Show up.
You have the best one-lines of everyone. And I can see Aliza, she has these moments of just like, fuck, that was so good. I don't want to forget that.
I know, I'm upset that I don't. I'm going to collect your phrases after.
Well,
I
and
got
I
a question from a non-Jewish participant about how they can be an ally. And
oh man, put a menorah out during Hanukkah, put a mezuzah on your front door, wear a Magen David. This is like the Dutch putting on the yellow star, the king putting on a yellow star and asking all the non-Jews to put on a yellow star. So the Nazis couldn't round up the Jews because they couldn't identify the Jews. So I wish I'd thought of this sooner, before the middle of Hanukkah, which is when it occurred to me. We should try to create an America where there are millions of Hanukkiot burning in the windows, where there are millions of mezuzot on the doors. A lot of our Christian and Muslim friends and neighbors will support us. They just don't know how.
I completely agree. And by the way, I wanted to just say, like, thank you for whoever even asked this question, because it is really meaningful. And, you know, just by the way, hearing your passion, like, Rabbi, is beautiful.
We have a prayer for captives. We have a prayer for the state of Israel. Say these prayers as a family. Say them with your kids.
But also, like, I would just say to, like, speak up, right? Like, check on your Jewish friends. I remember every single person who checked on me after October 7th. I literally can name, I can write you a list, and I remember every single person who asked me if I'm okay, checked in on my family. Are the people safe? How are you feeling? How can I help? You know, how can I show up? All of those questions, even if we don't reply to you, we know, we internalize. It is so meaningful. And, you know, again, as like an activist, I talk so much about like activism is everywhere, right? It happens on your phone calls, it happens on your Zooms, it happens in your office, it happens, you know, like at the bus stop. You always have an opportunity to tell someone that they're doing something wrong or help them do something a different way. And remember that, like, if you're scared, imagine how we feel, right? Like, and, you know, like, just show up. Like, I always talk about this. One of, you know, one of my friends always says, like, you can fake caring, but you can't fake showing up. And I look at our rallies and I'm like, where are the people? I know that you care, right? And like, we've learned so much over the last decade about how important language is. And I say every day, like, I know my friends and colleagues and people are like opening up their phones and seeing all this, like, what they know is like propaganda and hate and just things that just shouldn't be said, like, ever. And so also, like, you call that out, you message your friend who did the thing and call them, like, all of that stuff. Like, some days I think we just need more allies and we need more support. And we just need
and we also will find out in that process. One of the things I say to people whose lives have blown apart for one reason or another when they come to see me is, well, you're about to find out who your friends are and who is not your friend.
Yeah.
And that's also discerning and important for all of us, not just our children, but for us, because the people who can't show up for you when you're suffering, our allies with whom we marched, who we now realize we were marching on a one-way street with them and they will not march with us. We're done with them. We're done with them. After asking, please, will you do this video so I can post it? Will you come to this? Will you do that? And the answer is, oh man, I can't get into that. I'm sorry. I can't. Okay, now I know. I know it was a one-way street. And, you know, the people who matter don't mind if you reach out to them for support. And the people who do mind, they don't matter. You gotta, like, let it go. Or as my friend Dr. Aliza Pressman would say, they're assholes. Move on.
Articulate. That was in chapter 4 of her book that just came out.
Yes.
Title chapter 4 is called "They're Assholes."
They're assholes. Move on.
It's such a good book. I really recommend everyone reads it. On that note, I really do want to thank you all for showing up today. And I really think it's like truly more important now than ever that we continue to show up for each other. I think we all hope that you leave here today with a bit more hope, knowing that you're not alone, that, like, truly we are all just doing our damn best against the most difficult, batshit crazy of circumstances. I genuinely.
That's chapter 3. That's chapter 3. Batshit crazy.
I like definitely. I really do, like, and again, I'm like a very type A person who spends all my life trying to wonder, like, well, did I do it right? Right. And like, I think just feeling permission from you both to, like, believe in myself and my ability as a parent and, like, what I know and what Judaism and my community and my parents have taught me. And then I would just say to, like, everyone here, and obviously this is going to get distributed to a lot of different people through different channels, but to please just send us feedback. Like, we want to know how this went, if we should continue doing them. And then on a very sort of related but not personal note, if anyone has college students that want to support a grassroots campaign we have coming up about sort of this, please email me. I don't know if there's any parting words from my leader or Aliza, but I just want to thank you all again so much, and I want to thank you both for helping me.
Oh, you're a force of nature. I'm just so proud of you, for you, and grateful to you. Duset daram.
You're so
I
good.
agree with everything Rabbi Steve said, except I don't know Farsi yet, and I have a sneaking suspicion that's where we just went.
Yeah, that's right.
And I hope everybody here knows, just by being here, to go to the very first question, you are not traumatizing or screwing up your kids.
Thank you. All right. You're the best. And everyone, thank you again so much for joining, and we'll make sure you will get this and have an amazing rest of your night. And I'll see you soon.
Thank you, Madonna. You're amazing. Thank you, Aliza. You're amazing.
You're amazing. You're all amazing.
Bye,
I
guys.
feel so good being Jewish.
That's as we should. Bye.
Bye.